Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. It's really great to see you all. I'd like to introduce, my name's Laura, I'm hosting the webinar. And I'm going to introduce Cynthia, who's going to make a presentation and then open up for question and answer. Cynthia Bampton is the co-founder of the Awakened Life Project with her husband Peter, which is physically based in Portugal, but has members all over the world. Cynthia is a spiritual teacher and teaches courses and retreats. And I'd just like to say, one of Cynthia's really fantastic talents is being able to really understand and see a problem that someone's having and make it very clear to them. So if you have a question or you just have an impulse to engage with Cynthia during the Q&A part, then don't hold back. Don't be shy, don't be afraid, just really go with your impulse and let Cynthia do her thing. Okay, over to you, Cynthia.
You're muted, Cynthia.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, sorry about that. So I just want to start with a meditation. So if everyone could just sit up straight and find a comfortable position. You make sure if you're sitting with your feet on the floor that they're flat on the floor and your back is straight. And take a deep breath in through the nose, bringing the air all the way down into the lungs, expanding the belly. And as you exhale, just relax and relieve any tension that you might be feeling in the body. And again, inhaling very deeply and exhaling any tension. So do that on your own, at your own speed. Just allowing your stomach to expand and your lungs to expand. And when you exhale, release the tension. And be aware as you breathe that the breath actually brings life. And as you allow yourself to breathe deeply, you can get in touch with something that's prior to thought, prior to feeling. So let the breath enliven you and relax you. And when you're ready, you can just breathe naturally, but still allow yourself to breathe fully. So with every breath that you take, be aware that you are not controlling the breath. You are participating in how deeply you breathe, but you are not creating the breath. Breathing is happening, always. The body is being breathed. You are being filled with life force. You, who you know yourself to be, is not doing anything. But when you slow down, as you're doing now, you're becoming conscious of the body being breathed. Or most of the time, we don't even notice. So allow your attention to relax, but still keep your attention on the softness and the sensations of the body as it's being breathed. It doesn't matter if the mind is busy. It doesn't matter if it's quiet. Just as the body is being breathed, the movement of mind is occurring. You are not creating the thoughts that may be arising. The movement of mind is occurring or not. So be very conscious that the body is being breathed, the mind is moving. You might be aware of sounds or smells. It's all arising in your awareness. But the awareness I'm talking about is not you personally. It's not your awareness as a separate self. It's awareness. Itself. And you are that which is aware. You are that which is prior to the arising of content. You are that which is the witness of the body being breathed, of the movement of mind, the sensations of the body, the sounds, but you are not confined or limited to any ideas, any thought, any beliefs. You are the vast awareness in which all content is arising. Normally, we believe ourselves to be the content. Normally, our habit is to personalize the movement of mind, a thought, an emotion, a feeling. If the body feels tense, we automatically say, I am tense. If the mind is moving, we automatically say, my mind is very busy, or I have a busy mind. So what I'm talking about is a shift of identification. It's a very simple shift from personalizing and identifying with the content that is arising in awareness to awareness itself as yourself. It's not a personal awareness. It is consciousness. It's only our habitual insistence that I am what I think, I am what I believe, I am what I feel. And that insistence is an action that comes from the personalization of thought. So it's just another thought that's arising in your awareness, in awareness yourself, as yourself. So again, it doesn't matter what content is arising. It doesn't matter if the mind is still, the mind is busy. It doesn't matter if you feel happy or unhappy. It only matters that you recognize it all as one thing, as content that's arising in awareness. You don't have to fight with it. You don't have to change it. The moment you start to fight with the thoughts that are arising or the sensations in the body because you don't like them, you want them to be different, is the moment that you suffer. If anxiety is arising, it's arising. If you personalize it, you will suffer. If you don't personalize it, you will be free from it. But that doesn't mean you deny it's arising. If it's there, it's there. If you deny it, you're personalizing it. You're fighting with it. If you're trying to accept it, you're personalizing it. It's the moment that you relax as awareness itself and you watch the whole show that you experience space, relaxation, and ease of being. But it's not the separate self that experiences space, relaxation, and ease of being. The personalization is the creation of the separate self. When you drop that personalization, you rest in your natural state, which is relaxed, spacious, unlimited. And this space and deep ease of being is always available. It's always who you are. Whether you feel good or you don't feel good. Whether fear is arising or joy is arising. If you personalize joy, it's a movement away from what's real and true, which is always prior to and before the content that's arising. Just take a few moments to rest as yourselves, as awareness. And if there's a movement to try to change your experience, recognize it's just another movement. It's just content. But you rest as that which is aware. You're trying to push something away. That's not it. You're trying to change anything. That's not it. So be very easy with yourself, because the habit to personalize can be very strong. But just recognize if you're aware of the contraction that occurs when you personalize thought. You don't have to do anything. You're just aware that you're aware. And then you will recognize space and ease of being. Just to take one last very, very deep breath in. And when you exhale, release. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. I'm always amazed how deep you can go into a meditation when you're on a screen. It always kind of amazes me that all separation completely disappears. All the ideas that people might have about separation and how being on a computer is a limitation. It's just an idea in your head. Of course, it's different than being physically with others, but as we go through this webinar, you might notice that you don't even notice that you're alone in your room. You might feel like we're all in one room together. And in one sense, we are. It's just maybe a room, it's a different room. So the name of the webinar is You Are Always in God's Hands. So the reason I came up with this title is because I was talking to one of the members of our community who's a doctor, who's working in the hospitals with the coronavirus, and who was very concerned about her family and very concerned about her own health. And, and facing into the fact that some doctors don't survive. So she was being very, very real with her situation. And so we talked a bit, and I said to her, in one way, it doesn't matter if the body drops. There's nothing you can do about it. If the body drops, the body drops. There's nothing any of us can do about it. And we don't ever know when that's going to happen. So of course, when you're faced with something like being a doctor in a hospital surrounded by coronavirus, it becomes more real to us. But the interesting thing is it's always the case. Death is always a possibility. So in a certain way, we're always in God's hands. From one perspective, it's not just sometimes, it's always. So if you've ever noticed that there's times that in your life that you might have felt lost or confused or fearful, but in those times where you might even feel very deep despair and frustration, you might notice that there's something there that isn't moving, that isn't part of the drama that you're experiencing. Sometimes I describe it as it feels like you have a friend that you can't see. And there's times when if you look in your own experience and you say, yeah, I noticed that in those moments in my life when I was very upset or very fearful or even freaking out, there was a moment that I recognized, I'm freaking out, I'm upset. And in that moment, all of a sudden you get in touch with something because you've actually given up in that moment. You haven't maintained the sense of freak out. You're not engaging in the drama the same way that you were maybe a moment prior. And it's in that moment that we recognize there's something there that I can't see, I can't get with my mind, but it's always there. If you look back in your life, maybe you can just, however old you are, just look back and you can see that the body has changed. You can see that maybe your relationships have changed. You can see that your physical location of where you live has changed. You can see that almost everything over the last however old you are, how many years, you can see that there's always something that's changing, and you can see, wow, I've gone through this crisis, I've gone through this joyful experience, I've gone through just multiple different experiences. Most of them we can't even remember, but some of them are very vivid. But as you recognize all those things that change, see if you can recognize that there's actually something that has always been there that has never changed. If this doesn't, you just got to think about this for yourself. And really, this is where the mind can come in really handy, because it's a way that you can objectively look at your experience and say, yes, I can see that a lot has changed. And then you can go, wow, I can see that everything is changing. But I can see myself as consciousness, who's been conscious of everything that's ever happened, has never changed. So when we are contracted and when we think that we are a separate, isolated individual, we think we are our story, we think we are our history. We're convinced that we have problems that we have to get over before we can be free. We're always seeking outside of ourselves to find something that's going to make us feel better. And even when we feel better, we continue to seek, because then the voice will come up or the thought will arise that said, okay, you feel good now, but it's not going to last. I think everybody can relate to that. So there's something that's constantly changing, and there's something, everything is constantly changing, but there's something that never changes. So it's actually quite interesting because, if we're seeking for freedom, and if we recognize, wow, freedom is always available to me when I stop insisting that there's a problem. Freedom is always there, the space, this deep relaxation, it's always there. When I stop trying to change the experience I'm having, when I accept the situation that I'm in, I get in touch with something. All of a sudden, I get in touch with something that is prior to all of the movements that are arising in my awareness. Is everybody with me? Okay, because it's important. You have to find this out for yourself, because it doesn't really help anybody if you just say, okay, I am already free, I am already free, I am already free, and you're completely freaked out and anxious trying to make yourself believe yourself is already free. But in the moment that you're doing that, even if that's your experience, you can go, I'm already free, I'm already free, I'm really trying to be free, I'm really trying to be free, I'm trying really hard to be free, okay, I'm free, I know I'm free, they told me I was free, so I must be free. But you see, all you have to do is be aware of that crazy movement and and fall back and say, oh, I am that which is aware of this crazy movement. And then the illusion pops right there. So when we talk about always, you are always in God's hands, we have those moments where we finally surrender, when we're stressed out, when we can't take it anymore, we feel like we're just at the end of our rope, or when we're in nature and something happens, or you have, the doors of perception open and you just feel like, oh my God, everything is perfect. Whatever that is for you and however that's happened. You see, so in that moment we go, oh my God, the human experience is I feel like I'm being held. I'm being held by something. And that feeling of being held is what I'm talking about as far as I'm in God's hands. So it's not a God that's outside of yourself. Okay, I'm in God's hands. So when I'm saying this, what I'm trying to say is the human experience feels like I, Cynthia, this separate body, is now resting in God's hands, as if God has hands and he's holding this body. But emotionally, that's what the experience is. It's just like this feeling of coming home and I'm in God's hands. But you see, that's the experience of it when we're identified with being the body. But when we recognize that I am not just the body, I am that which is aware, that's really in that moment You see, when you let go of the insistence of the separate sense of self, in that moment, you've dropped that insistence, and what's left? Consciousness itself as yourself. No separation. So the reality is, it's not a human body that's in God's hands as if God is something else. What's really happening is you're dropping the insistence of separation, and you're recognizing there is only one consciousness, and there's many manifestations of this consciousness, and this body is one of those manifestations. You see, you recognize all that to be true, but you're not imposing any separation. And then what you're really experiencing is you're really experiencing the truth of unity. You're experiencing one consciousness without the imposition of separation. And the human experience is of coming home. Why? Because that's who you really are. You know, and then we feel like we're being held, we're in God's hands. You know, and so you don't have to deny that experience, because that's the experience that the human body is having. That's the experience that it feels like that. So it doesn't mean that that's not true. It doesn't mean that you have to get rid of that, you know, emotional experience. If that's the experience you're having, that's the experience you're having. But recognize that what's really happening is there's no dualism. There's not two. There's only one thing going on. And it's the recognition of consciousness itself as myself. And then the as myself even disappears because it's just consciousness. So when things happen, we always tend to think that we're being held, you know, we're in God's hands. When we let go and we recognize that space and we recognize that relief. But if there is only one consciousness, and everything in this manifest world is a modification or a manifestation of that consciousness, then we also have to recognize that we are actually being held in God's hands, even when everything seems to be going terribly wrong. Because we like to say that, you know, this is good, this is bad, this is consciousness, this is not consciousness, this is evil and dark. Okay, so what if we recognize that we're always in God's hands, and then we go further with it? We always recognize that there is only one consciousness. We recognize that I am that. And we also recognize that I am always prior to any content that's arising in my experience. So we recognize all that. And then we're able to appreciate those moments of pressure. We're able to appreciate what we would label as negative, because we recognize that there is no other place to be but in God's hands, whether you think it's going the way it should go or not. It's always the case. But just imagine if you're feeling a lot of contraction. Let's say you know everything seems to be very small. You're focusing on all your problems. You know, this is a very good opportunity with the coronavirus, you know, to think you've got lots of problems, and people do have real problems. You know, there's money issues going on, there's health issues, there's all sorts of stuff going on, so we're not denying that. But if you can also see that this compression that you might feel sometimes is also being held in God's hands, you can see that that compression is actually, you know, causing that pressure, causing that friction, so that, you know, that this lump of coal right here can be smoothed into a beautiful diamond. So can we stay with that process? Can we see that it's not negative? It's not something other than God. It's all God. The whole process is God. There's nowhere to go that you can't be held in God's hands. There's nowhere to go. Where are you going to go to get away from yourself? Everywhere you go, there you are. I had this funny story with my ex-husband. This was quite a long time ago. But, you know, we'd always be like in conflict. And I remember, you know, and I could see that I had certain habits that weren't that great. They could have changed. And I remember just looking at him and, you know, I could see I was just like, ugh. And I said, you know, you're really lucky because you can get away with me, get away from me. But everywhere I go, there I am. You know, and he just looked at me, thought he was even more crazy. But now I look at it and that was quite profound. But that is the case everywhere we go. We can't get away from ourselves. We can't get away from the fact that we're consciousness. Even if we don't believe it, it's still the case. You can think that you're a victim if you want to, but you're going to suffer. You can, you know, so it's everything is available to us at all times, in all places, in all circumstances. It just depends on how we want to relate to the experience that we're having in this particular body. Do we want to relate to it from the perspective that's very limited and separate, which means I am Cynthia, I am from, you know, I'm American, I'm 61 years old, I have bad knees, I feel like shit sometimes, I have a problem, my husband doesn't do this, and that. Do we want to relate to life like that? Or do we want to go, okay, there's certain habits that this body-mind has. There's certain characteristics this body-mind has, but who am I? Who am I? I'm not denying I'm American. I'm not denying that I'm 61. I'm not denying anything. But who am I? Am I that? Or am I much more than that? So what if I actually understood that, oh, I am that which is aware to this movement of mind, to the personalization of thought and feeling? What if I'm aware of all this and I do enough practice for myself to just constantly do the work to say, I am not that, I am that which is aware. And it's not like it's not a mantra trying to convince yourself. It's looking and seeing in each moment what's true. Because if you are aware of the movement of mind, you are not that. You are that which is aware. But most of the time we don't even go there. We're so convinced we're just this mess of thoughts and feelings and emotions. And that's usually where we come from. So the truth is right in our faces. The truth is right there. The mind is not a problem. We don't have to empty the mind. We just have to have the right relationship to all of it. And then we learn, we evolve, we make different choices. We can either cause ourselves suffering by the choices we make, or we cannot. We may still feel pain. We may still feel sadness. We may feel more pain and sadness, but the difference is we're not going to suffer. Feeling pain and feeling is not what causes suffering. What causes suffering is the imposition of separation, the creation of the separate self, because it's a separation between, you know, from your true nature. And that's what breaks us. That's what hurts. That's what causes us suffering. If you look in your own life, it's not the individual things that cause you suffering in any given moment. It's the insistence that you're separate. Separate from what? Separate from what's real and true. Separate from your own heart. That's the most painful thing. And we have a choice to impose that separation or not. And we can choose that no matter what situation that we're in. And sometimes it takes a lot of effort. But, you know, especially if you're quarantined, you don't really have much else to do. So, you know, we have the time to look and get familiar with, you know, what is really going on here. And the situation we're in is so unknown, you know, and new. You know, and we're getting all sorts of information. It's very difficult to know what to trust and what not to trust from an information point of view. So what are we going to do? To me, it's like the only thing I know what is real and true is the fact that I am that which is prior to the movement of all this content. And then from there, then I say, does this make sense? or not. But it's not a grasping for an answer so I can feel secure. The security doesn't come from finding an answer in this world. It comes from resting in yourself as yourself, and then living in this world because we're in a body. So we're not denying our human experience at all. This is not kind of a spiritual bypass. It's a full engagement, but not engaging with the world in the way that you think. Because in the world, usually when we're engaging in the world, we're trying to fulfill some idea of who we think we should be, who we think we shouldn't be, what we should have, what we shouldn't have, what we should think, what we shouldn't think. That's how we usually engage with the world, which basically means we're not really engaging with anything outside of our own minds. If you think about it, most people, we're just engaging with our head, or wherever we perceive our mind to be. So what if we were actually resting as consciousness itself? We recognize ourselves to be that which is aware. We're not acting out of fear. We're not acting out of anxiety. We're not seeking outside of ourselves to feel okay, because we know we're already okay, even if we feel bad. And then we engage. It's a completely different, level of engagement. The other is not really engaging. Like I said, you're just engaging with your mind. But what I'm talking about is I'm talking about responding to life, engaging for real, having real relationships, not just a relationship with your mind and an objectification of whoever you're with, but actually taking that whole mask off and being truly together and finding out what that looks like. Because I'm not even saying, sometimes people say, oh, let's really be together. And then it's supposed to be some, utopian experience of whatever we think love and unity is. And we're supposed to frolic around in the flowers and all of that, It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what does it mean to be in real relationship with other human beings, with all the complexity of being a human being. What does that look like? And, it's a lot more friction, but friction is not necessarily bad. Maybe sometimes it does look like, love and bliss and flowers and, it looks like the movie. Sometimes it might look like that. But if it doesn't look like that, it doesn't mean there's a problem. It all depends on where you're putting your attention and who you think you are. That's the bottom line. Okay, so I went a little longer than I thought, but I really wanted to put this to you because, this is a time of crisis, but this is a time of opportunity where we all need to find a deeper dimension of ourselves. We all need to start thinking for ourselves from that perspective so that we can make different choices. So when this crisis is all over, that we just don't go back to all of our old habits and we fall back into this like contracted existence. So many people I've talked to, they're going, God, this is so great. I actually have time to just live and be. And I'm sure some people are bored and frustrated. But it's such an opportunity. I mean, we've never had like the world shut down before. We're all in something together, no matter what country we're from, no matter where we're at, no matter what we think, we're all in the same boat, which is fantastic. So this is a moment that we shouldn't waste. It's a moment we can learn a lot. It's a moment that we can transcend a lot. And it's a moment that we can rest deeply in something prior to the anxiety that we're usually living under, the agitation. So that's really what I wanted to say tonight. So I hope some of it, I hope it made sense to you. So it's really like, how do we live? Who am I? It's the spiritual questions. Who am I and how shall I live? That's what it comes down to. Who am I and how shall I live? Most of the time, it's just like, how shall I live? And we don't know who we are. We're very convinced that we're not spirit, God, and consciousness. We're very convinced we're something else, and then we live. And we get a completely different outcome. But we're all here, so this is good. You could have been somewhere else right now, but you're on this webinar, so this is fantastic. Okay, so let's open up for people for questions and comments. And I want to say hello to Daniela. Hi, Danny. I haven't seen her for a long time. Okay, so again, you don't need to be afraid. I'm actually quite nice. So, Lawrence?
Oh, Jim, waving.
Jim, are you waving?
I was.
Hi, Jim.
Yeah. Hi, Cynthia.
How's it going in San Diego?
You know, it was a little cloudy this morning. The sun is coming out and it's cool, so it's pleasant. People are hunkered down. I'm hunkered down at home with my wife, and my son moved in with us to work from home, and appreciating that time and the time to be together. And I find, you know, listening to you, I was listening and I was thinking, for me, I know it's what you say is golden, and I don't know where that came from, but it's just like, it just resonates so deeply as I listen to you, and it's just, you know, the truth is the truth. And so I don't know what else to say about that outside of there's a great, you know, tremendous amount of gratitude and simplicity. And you know, I've been working at, if you want to call it that, consciously for over 40 years now, and so I've heard a lot, and so it resonates in my heart and my mind because it's so familiar, and still the habit of identifying myself as the doer of the action. I am this, I'm the one feeling, I'm the one thinking. It's just a knee-jerk habit, I guess, and reaction, and you know, just kind of like pausing in that and recognizing that I am the one that's aware. I am that by which I know I am, whatever that is. And also recognizing when that shift happens, it's not like I become an object in consciousness. There's no one there that I'm pointing to. At least that's the way it seems. It's like, who am I? And you don't know who you're asking the question about because it doesn't come up in terms of something you can grasp with your mind. It's just kind of an opening out and an extension of the heart to what's already in front of you. And at least that's the way it is occurring to me. And I naturally feel that when I sit and with this group and I listen to you speak. So in that, always a deep sense of gratitude.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I think the trick is any time that there's a contraction or an identification with a thought, because that's really what ego is. It's the personalization and the identification with the thought that means something about me, which is the creation of the separate self. The trick really is to see that whole movement to personalize thought, it doesn't even matter if you're personalizing thought. It doesn't matter in a certain way if you're completely convinced that you are, you know, you've got problems and you're messed up and you'll never be free, because all of that is just thought that's arising. So the trick really is to recognize that it doesn't make any difference if all of that's arising. So you can look at it two ways, and I'm not saying you're saying this, I'm just kind of taking off from what you said. But most of the time we think we have to do something to change that movement of mind. Because who is the I that's actually personalizing thought? It's just another thought. There is no I that's personalizing thought. But if we believe that there is, then we think we have a problem to get over, and then we have lots of things to do, which is really just a distraction away from I am always already free. I am that which is prior to the movement of anything. It's a distraction. So even if you're distracted, you know, if you're distracted, you will suffer. But the moment you become aware of any of this, the suffering, the distraction, any of it, you see that moment you get in touch with that which is always there, which is always the case. But if you can recognize that it doesn't matter if you don't have to fix this movement of personalization from one perspective. You have to just recognize that it's just a movement of mind. But if you continue to believe it, that's where the problem comes in. And that's where you're suffering. But you see, even that you don't have to, it doesn't have to take any time, because even if you've been doing that for 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years or however, of believing that you are the movement of mind, believing that you have a problem to get over, believing that there's something in the way of you being your true self. Even if you've been doing that forever, you see, in the moment that you recognize I am that which is aware, all of that disappears. Now you may pick it up again because the momentum of the habit can be strong. But if you've been doing something for 50 years, you don't have to stop doing it for 50 years before you recognize freedom. Before you recognize I am not that. In the moment you stop personalizing it, that 50 years of momentum doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens in a flash.
Right.
And you have a whole new world. I mean, I really get what you're talking about, and it's very helpful to hear it. Can't hear it too many times, I don't think.
No.
So,
but you know, so often we think when we start recognizing egoic patterns, sometimes with people's best intentions, the movement to think that we have to seek for something different is a movement away from what's always already the case. The movement to seek is very, very subtle. Sometimes it's gross, sometimes it's subtle. But what if we could, what if there was actually nothing that you needed to change? What would you do? What would we do with all our time? And that's why the quarantine is really good, because there's a lot of things you can't change. Right. And then you can watch your mind spinning out.
I love it. Yeah.
Me too. It's really good. I'm glad to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Thank you and everyone else that's here. Great gathering.
Okay. Anybody else? Richard, were you on the one meditation day the other day?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, Richard. You will?
Another Richard.
Yes, I was, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Do we have more than one Richard? Yeah, I thought you looked familiar. That's why I wanted to check. Nice to see you again.
You too.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a question about relationship with you. I've raised with you privately, but I just want to, I can understand all this individual, dealing with the self. I wondered how that interlinks with a relationship with someone else. Could you speak a bit more about that sort of thing?
Usually the relationship that we have with our mind has a lot to do with the relationships we have with other people. Because if we have a certain, let's say we have a certain image that we're protecting, or we have an image of ourselves, then we're going to be seeing through the filter of that image. And as we see through the filter of that image, we're going to be projecting that onto the other. And so usually if you look at it, if you've got two people, in a sexual relationship, let's say, and you've got two people who are both have images of themselves that they're trying to protect. And even with their best intentions, they want to come together. But you see, the problem is if you have an idea, an image of yourself that you need to protect, you are basically, you need to protect it from the other person that you're with. And so if you have an image and you have a mask, you see, you're not really relating to the person. That person is not really a person to you. It's an object to be able to fulfill and, what's the word I want? To give you feedback that your image is intact. So basically the definition of ego is basically you have a mask, you have a persona that you're protecting. And who are you protecting it from? You're protecting yourself from the other. And the other usually is your closest relationship. And so even with your best intentions, if you're coming from that perspective, you see you're always going to have conflict, you're always going to have pain, you're always going to have suffering, and you're always going to have miscommunication. So really, freedom comes from pointing the finger at oneself and saying, do I want to be free? Which means, do I want to be nobody without a mask more than I want to be somebody? You see, and if two people are coming together with that intention to come really together, which means there is no separation, we're already together. We don't need to do anything to be together. I don't need to prove anything to myself or to you. I don't need to prove that my mask is, is real. I'm just willing to be vulnerable and present. You see, and then usually that takes away a lot of the conflict. But usually in relationship, most people are acting from a very egoic position, even with their best intentions. And that's what causes the problem in relationship. And it's not just sexual relationship, it's any relationship. But of course, then when you get into the arena of sexual relationship, there's a lot of attachment. There's a lot of ideas of how it should look. It should all look kind of like the movies, where everybody's, we have all these ideas and we think, oh, I don't believe it's supposed to be like the movies. But I tell you, if you really look, a lot of the ideas we have about how relationships should be are kind of from the movies. And I think all of us know, when we make love and we wake up in the morning, we don't wake up the way they look in the movies, right?
Yeah.
So if we're projecting these ideas onto each other, we're protecting ourselves, we have our self-images, but we're also, we're trying to create what we think is the proper, the beautiful relationship. You see, we're reaching for something that's just an idea. It has nothing to do with actually being with the other person. So when I did read your email today, so I'm glad we're talking, and I'll kind of do it in code because I don't want to, but the main thing is really, I think, communication, because we're all very conditioned, and we all have very sensitive rejection buttons, especially in sexual relationship. And if communication isn't clear, then, in your case, not choosing to live in the same city, you see, there could be a lot of emotional attachment to that decision. And I don't know if it was how it was communicated, but even if it was communicated perfectly, there can be a rejection button that's pushed very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And I tell you, that rejection button is pretty active in most people pretty much all the time. Because we always want the other to give us what we think we need. And if we don't get it, then we're upset, we're frustrated, we blame, we shame people. And it's sad because there's actually authentic love, and people do really want to be together. But unless we learn about this habit of ego and how it works, it's pretty much doomed. I mean, all we have to do, I think everybody, if you look at your experience, how many times have you been in a relationship and you see where it went terribly wrong, and then you say, I'll never do that again. And then you get in another relationship and then you do it again. Even with your best intentions. So we have to really be more interested in being a free, liberated human being, first and foremost, so that the finger's pointed here, so I'm not coming from any egoic patterns that I'm unconscious about, or I'm willing to give up the ones that I am conscious about. You see, if the finger is pointed here, then you can communicate better. You can receive feedback more easily. We can listen better. And if you're with someone else that's interested in that also, you see, then you have a ground that's very different than most relationships, because most relationships, it's all really about fulfilling needs in the other person.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah,
that
thank
helpful?
you. Yeah. I think we said there about connection. If the connection is genuine, and then it's something that will survive sort of physical separation.
Well, yeah, because really, if you think about it, are you really separate even if the bodies are in two different places?
No, not really.
Not really. I mean, is something missing right now because you're in two different places? I mean, it's different, but I mean, obviously you wouldn't be having a physical relationship, but when I say, is anything really missing? You see, this is the root of really seeing through ego. Because if you look and you think about your partner right now, and you feel her, you see nothing's missing. She's not there, but nothing's missing.
Yeah, I do feel that sort of way as well. So,
But you see, that's always the case. That's the thing, because when you don't feel that, you will assume that there's a problem, right? But you see, if the truth, and I always go back to like the spiritual truth, if the truth is that there is only one consciousness, and that there really is no separation, because if there's only one consciousness, that means everything in this manifest world is that consciousness. And that means that the space between two physical bodies is also consciousness. So where is the separation? You see, so when we say something is missing, it has to be egoic. We can say something is different because obviously if two people are in the same room, there's a difference than if you're, in two different cities. But that doesn't mean that there's something missing, and it doesn't even mean there's a problem. And the intimacy is always available, even though it's a different kind of intimacy because you're not physically together.
Yeah.
It's very challenging though, because you have to really embrace that there actually isn't a problem.
Okay, thank you.
You're like, okay, I've had enough. That's okay.
I don't want to hog the limelight too much.
Yeah, no, it's not doing that, because this is a topic, everybody loves relationship topics, Richard. They're probably very happy that you brought it up. Okay, and your relationship is no different than anybody else's relationship. And it's like, what is your relationship to what's real and true? And then I tell you, all the rest of your relationships will fall into line. There will be times of struggle because you can know all this stuff, you can rest in all this stuff most of the time. But I tell you, when your buttons are pushed, sometimes it's not a smooth ride. But that's the moment. Remember when I was saying, even in that moments where it's like, woo, you see, in that moment, you're still in God's hands. And that's the moment you can go, this is really stupid. Why don't we just drop all this? And let's just be together because we're already together.
Yeah.
That's the moment when you recognize you're on the same team, even though you want to rip each other's faces off. That's the moment something different can happen. Because everybody has to put down their insistence of being right. You see, and that's it. And when you put that down, and maybe one person is right and one person isn't, but in the big picture, what's more important is that you put down your weapons. You put down that, that insistence. And then this intimacy that arises is far beyond, anything that could have happened when you were just trying to be together. Because if we're trying to be together, we're actually convinced that we're not already together. You see?
Yeah.
And as long as we think we're not already together, that's egoic. And you've got two egos trying to come together. That's the problem. Because egos don't want to come together. Egos want to be right. Egos want to have a problem. Egos love drama. Even if you're suffering, egos love suffering. Because then there's more drama and there's more position of being right, and it's just endless. And the ego is just like sitting there having a party. But, and you got to decide, which party do you want to go to? That's the point. And that's why really what I'm trying to say is everybody needs to learn more and more about the movement of ego, and do whatever practice you need to do so that you can consciously, recognize who you are prior to all of this. So the two have to go together. Of course, if somebody, recognizes God, and you're like Ramana Maharshi or somebody, and they completely disappear, never to have conflict again, that's fantastic. But until that happens for all of us, it's a good idea to do the practice, to meditate, to do like what Jim was saying, say, oh, I am that which is aware, right, okay. Oh, I'm contracted again. Oh, but I'm aware of my contraction. Oh, okay. You see, that's the practice. It's moment to moment. It's not just when you're meditating. It's not when you're in the heat of battle. It's all the time. Where is my attention? Where is my attention? Not from an anxiety point of view. It's like, oh my God, and getting all frantic about it. It's just a soft, where is my attention? What am I doing? Where's my attention? Who am I? These questions, you don't have to come up with answers. Sometimes if you ask, who am I, long enough, you won't need the answer. Okay, good. Nice talking to you, Richard.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Rick, you wrote a question. You emailed the question. Did you want to ask it, or is it?
It doesn't feel like it's really pertinent right now, but I just was feeling, again, I'm so appreciative of these moments, sitting here in this group with you and listening to others. And it feels like a part of this awakened relationship to life is this intimacy with the very moment. The intimacy implies a non-separation, and what I'm feeling now is just this tremendous open-heartedness and undefensiveness to whatever the moment is, and it's that intimate connection it happens a lot. I feel grace in that it happens more and more. And right now I'm saying it like it's just so obvious, this intimacy with the moment. This is the only moment there is. This consciousness, this awareness just wants to wholeheartedly meet this moment with that open-heartedness. And because there's nothing else, this is it. And it's like the moment is a wonderful opportunity always to meet in a loving, caring embrace. And there's not, the thing, it just feels, it doesn't make sense to want to defend anything. It doesn't make sense. You just want to be in this relationship with the moment and whoever is here. And then no experience even is threatening that. Even fear doesn't threaten it. You want to meet fear with this openness of heart, opening up heart. And you want to meet worry, or you want to meet anxiousness or frustration. It doesn't matter what it feels like, what the experience is. It's just that relationship to life. Does that make sense?
Right.
Or does that true?
Well, no, it makes sense. And not but, and there's a way that we can just let go of consciousness wants anything. Maybe consciousness doesn't want to meet the moment. Maybe consciousness is, maybe consciousness just is. And Okay, because everything you were saying, I think you were describing your experience, but in a certain way, it's like you, Rick, is having this experience of just like open-heartedness and joy. But just don't impose that experience that body, mind, name Rick is having onto consciousness. Because consciousness just is. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't need to be open-hearted. It doesn't need anything. You see, so what you're describing is the experience that you might be having right now, but there's nothing needed. Everything just is. And so when you're not having that experience that you're having right now, it's still the same.
Yes, I see what you're getting at. Yeah, the need to have that experience isn't there, which is a very subtle,
Right.
because you don't need anything.
There's still an I in there that's kind of, getting enthusiastic about having the experience of consciousness. So there's a little bit of in there that you want to take out, because you're just, the experience is just the experience, and it doesn't mean anything about anything. It just is the experience.
Yeah. Just the freedom itself of being, and even seeing that need, and not really as a temporary arising, and just like, okay,
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's like, okay, a need arises. It doesn't mean that you need anything. That's the personalization. As soon as a need arises, oh, I must need something. No, a thought just arose.
Yeah. Just another experience of this cascading of experiences. And
right. And consciousness, if you think about it, it's just, if consciousness is everything, it just is, and experience is just experience. Sometimes it's really good to contemplate, if I didn't make any experience mean anything about me, then who am I?
Yeah.
And it's also a good practice. It's also a good practice to just take a day or an hour or a couple hours and just watch how often you make something that's arising in your awareness, whether it be a thought or a feeling or emotion. Just watch and see how often, this is to everybody, how often you're making it mean something about a separate self named you that actually doesn't exist.
That feels very true. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and just feeling the mystery of this this whole life experience and how it's unfolding, and even that needing or those questions are all part of that too. And
right, but you are not the questions, and you are not the I that is asking the questions.
There's just a seeing. There's the seeing of it, this mysterious seeing.
Yeah.
I use the word awaring, like there's this mysterious awaring. And
but in a certain way, there's not, because you have to be careful not to put a separate self in there having the experience of awaring. So I don't know if you're doing that or not, but I'm just wanting to make sure, because there is only awareness. There is only that.
Yeah.
And there's only this moment, as you said earlier. There is just now, and now is not like 60 seconds long. Now is constantly changing. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
It's just
right.
And you don't, and none of it means anything about you as a separate self. It's just thought.
Because if it does, that's just also just the experience arising, and it doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. That's
it. You just sit here and laugh at it. Yeah.
Right. That's it. Yeah. And then you just laugh at the whole thing because you thought you were the star of the soap opera, and you realize the soap opera is just a bunch of content arising in your own awareness.
Yeah, sometimes I think that's why the Buddha always had a smile on his face, because it was like, there's nothing else to do but smile at this whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's another thing, as everybody's sitting at home being quarantined, just look at your relationship to your own life and just see if it's actually, if you're kind of the star of your own soap opera. Because what you call your life really is, that's really what it is, right? Mm-hmm. No matter how good the life is, if you think it's your life, just the idea that this is my life, means I have to be the star because it's mine, right? But what if it's just life? What if it's just experience and you are that which is prior to, and you're also, you know, you're also everything in manifestation. But you see, it doesn't mean anything about a separate self. It just is. But if you find, and everybody should just be honest, because everybody thinks they're the star of their own soap opera. It doesn't sound very spiritual, you know, so a lot of people don't like to admit it. But if you're personalizing thought and feeling, which everybody is doing, let's just be honest, then you think you're actually the star of your own soap opera somewhere. To whatever degree. Some people think they're completely convinced, and some people are less convinced. So wherever you fall in that range, but it's the insistence that I am separate. I have a problem. I mean, if you think about what a soap opera is, I have a problem. I'm dramatic. You are my problem. Let's get together because we're not already together. Oh, now we're together. Everything's beautiful and lovely and the birds are singing. Uh-oh, my boyfriend just slept with my best friend. Okay, now we're separate. You know, it's just like endless. So it's good. The truth does set us free. If we think we're the star of our own soap opera, if you actually get that. I actually, one time I was on retreat and I didn't exactly see myself as my own star of my own soap opera, but in the States, we had this TV show called I Love Lucy. I think a lot of people might know what it is. And so one time I was on retreat and I realized that, oh my God, my life is just like a bad sitcom. It's like being trapped in I Love Lucy reruns. And I was just like, oh my God, that is my life. It's a bad I Love Lucy rerun playing over and over again. And I've been completely fascinated with it, completely bored with it, but fascinated with the whole thing. And it was like quite a moment. Very liberating though. And now quite funny, but at the time it was a little bit shocking. So anyway, everybody, you know, you can find out for yourself. We all have to do the work to talk, you know, and to just be honest with our experience. And then we can all get together and laugh about it. You know, that's the best part of this. The way that we can blow the ego out of the water is we're not afraid to, you know, to speak, because when we speak, we're going to find out that we don't have any special problems. We don't have issues that nobody can relate to. There's nothing that anybody can say on this call, even if you've had a different kind of experience. But if you've had an experience that was incredibly painful, everybody knows what pain feels like. Everybody knows what fear feels like. We can have different nuances. But there's nothing outside that we can't relate to. And that takes the specialness away from any particular problem that you think you might have. And when you take the specialness away, that's when you take the ego. That's when you take the separate self out of the picture. Does everybody get what I'm saying? See, you know, the thing is we can understand all this stuff, but then we just got to decide if we're willing to do it. That's where the rubber hits the road, right? It's like I can understand everything about my egoic patterns, but do I want to give it up? Not too sure. But the only way that we actually get to the point where we want to give it up is when we recognize what ego is. And what ego really is, it's a very aggressive thing, because it's the insistence that I'm not who I am. And that's aggressive. And it's also insisting that you are not who you truly are. So that's aggressive. So if we're willing to just be our true selves, whatever that looks like, we're actually inviting other people to be their true self. If we come from a place of ego, we're inviting somebody to come from a place of ego. So when you're talking about relationship, what is your invitation going to be in the relationship that you have? And it can be very, very practical. And sometimes it's as simple as just communicating clearly, even if you think it's the wrong thing to say, even if you think you don't have it all together. If you're vulnerable, to just be able to speak, and you allow yourself to speak to another person. It's very simple. But do we want to be that simple? That's the thing. Do we want to be that vulnerable? And there is a desire in everybody, otherwise you wouldn't have been on this webinar, to just, you want to take off the mask and you just want to be together. See, and that's the awakening. Waking up and giving yourself to that desire that's actually coming from your own heart. If you give yourself to that again and again and again, that awakening will happen. A lot of you have probably seen something beyond the mind and recognized it to be a deeper dimension of yourself. But if you continue to give yourself to that in time and space, in relationship, you see, then we start having a different world to live in. We start having what true relationship might look like. And the truth is we don't actually know until we do it. It can't come from an idea. Because if it's coming from an idea, where's that idea coming from? So you see, we all have to be willing to just be in the unknown. And that's why this whole crisis is really exciting, because it's very unknown right now. We don't know what in the heck's going on. We don't know how long we're going to be in lockdown. We don't know anything. But you see, we can all be vulnerable together in that, because it's the truth for all of us. So this is what we're into. This is what life is about. You know, it's a time for purification. And if you look at your life, we have a lot of opportunities to be purified. Not, sometimes it's challenging. A lot of the times it's challenging. But it doesn't really matter in the end. It just matters if you want to be yourself and you're willing to, you're willing to let the egoic habits burn, in that fire of purification. So just at the end here, just going back, for the title of the webinar, you are always in God's hands. Just remember, you are always in God's hands, even when you don't like it. Even when you don't like what's going on. It's always the case. And then you have to remember, God's hands is not a God outside. It's the recognition that I'm actually resting as myself right here, right now, in this moment. So if everybody can embrace that you are already who you are, with all of your imperfections, you're always already who you are. So there's some purification to do, but it doesn't change the fact that you're always already free of everything you need to purify yourself from. The purification is just a recognition. It's a release of the ideas that keep the imposition of separation intact. That's all it is. So everybody says they want more love. Then you got to back it up with your own actions. Okay, so I see we're at 9:31, so I guess I should stop. But yeah, you guys, it's always at these webinars, and anytime, I just feel such I don't want to say hope, but it's just like such a joy that there's more and more people waking up to this and spending their time coming onto the webinars like this or other things, because that's what's pulling. It's pulling, something's already in motion. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. and you're responding to that pull. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. So I just encourage all of you, just respond to that pull. And if all of us do that, it's like, we have no idea what can happen. And I'm not talking about some utopia in the future of something coming from the mind. We actually don't know what can happen. Probably going to be much better than any idea we might have. But we won't know till we do it. Okay. So I guess it's time for Laura to do collective community happening. Exactly. That's it. It's a collective, but a collective is a recognition of that one in manifestation, coming together as the many. That's the beauty. And we won't even get started on collective, because collective is like, what can happen between us is far better than just one person becoming enlightened.
Maybe next month.
Maybe next month, yes.
Podcast.
Or podcast. Stay tuned. Okay, so I'm gonna let Laura do her thing.
Everyone, just want to tell you that tomorrow I will send the recordings of this webinar and an audio file, so you can listen to it again or share it with your friends. And of course, with the virus, all our upcoming events are the ones that aren't too far away have been cancelled, and the ones far away are in question. But Cynthia is making the podcast now, so that's really fantastic way to keep in touch and keep tuned in to everything that Cynthia's been talking about tonight. And also the course, Pete will be doing an online, possibly doing an online course. Pete was doing a course in May, but which might go online. But I will send details of all of these things tomorrow. And just to say that Cynthia does these webinars by donation, so I'll send out details of how to donate if you feel the impulse. I think that's it.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, because a lot of times, you know, most of the events that we normally do are in Portugal. So if you don't come to Portugal, there is a limitation. But we're just going to see how things are going. And so this course that Pete was going to give, he does it every year in Lisbon and Porto. But if he does it online, then it's possible for more people to participate. And the same thing with, I don't know what we're going to do with the rest of the events. I don't know how they're all going to unfold. We'll find out. But yeah, stay in touch, and we'll see you next month, if not before, somewhere. All right, so we can open up the microphones, and I'll say, I have to turn my volume down.
No,
I turned it up. Okay. All right. All right, so nice to see everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Be safe.
Bye.
Much love.
Ciao.
Right.
Ciao.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good to see everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, this is a good part. I like this part. All right.
Bye.
Okay, oh, look at